This is the Louie Tee Network.
Could it be? The me, your me, Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2017 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series, your guide to some of the biggest and the hottest names of the 2017 NFL Draft. We're talking running backs, and I think we've knocked down the big four, the four guys that I believe have a realistic shot at being first-round selections in the 2017 NFL Draft. And this is where you start to get to see some value picks in this draft at the running back position. This next running back that we're going to talk about has all the credentials, has all of the intangibles necessary on the field to be in that same discussion in the first round with the guys that we've already talked about in this series. But there's one off the field incident that won't allow him to be in that discussion, I believe. And I think there are some teams that are having this internal discussion about him as a potential first round pick, but I don't think anyone's going to have the gumption, the balls, the stones to pull the trigger on this young man in the first round. But don't think for 1 second that he's not in play in the second round. And I think someone's going to get phenomenal value because this is a guy that can get it done in a number of different ways to help your football team. Great athlete, great size. We'll get into all of those things. He wasn't invited to the combine. There are teams who have taken him off their board entirely because of that one incident off the field. But nonetheless, this guy is going to play in this league, and he's going to be a very good one if he's able to stay on the straight and narrow. I'm talking about Oklahoma's Joe Mixon. And this is a very controversial young man right here. When you talk about Joe Mixon, there are going to be people on one side of the fence, people on the opposite side of that discussion that don't want anything to do with him, don't think he represents what the NFL is all about. But at the end of the day, it's about what this man can provide for you on the football field. And we'll talk about that big discussion and that cloud hanging over his head as we get into his discussion a little bit later on down the line. But I went into this process thinking about Joe Mixon, and I said that he's a clone of Latavius Murray, now of the Minnesota Vikings, formerly of the Oakland Raiders. And I looked at his size, I looked at his build, I looked at his measurables and his speed, and I said, these are all Latavius Murray clones, except that he can catch it better than Murray can. And I went into the process thinking that way. I left feeling like a totally different way. And I think the best way to sum it up is a wise man once telling me, F it, I was wrong though. And so let's jump into his pros, because I watched the tape and he totally changed my thought process as to what this guy is at the next level and how good he can actually be. Let's jump into Joe Mixon and his pros right now. So you start with his size. Tremendous size is the first pro. I mean, at 6'1", 226, and I think he even checked in at 228. This guy's raw, chiseled muscle. At his pro day, or the little workout that he put together, and he talked to teams to reassure them that he made a mistake and that that's behind him and that's not who he is, and yada, yada, yada. You know how all of that goes when you're trying to rebuild an image and sell people on what you are. He looked great though at his workout. Ran in the 4.4s. That's what you heard. I think he ran about a 4.5. Doesn't matter. This guy's huge at 6'1", 225, 230, somewhere in that range. And he's got that upright build. You know how I am, guys. You know how I feel about upright runners. So you know he's got the whole look that I'm looking for. And his size is tremendous. And speaking of which, that leads me right to my next pro, physicality. He runs with a physicality that matches his size. He's a big kid at 6'1", 228 or so. And he's physical. He's a guy that runs through contact. He's a guy that, I mean, just turn on the Texas Tech tape. And I hate referencing Texas Tech because if you want to have a career day, go play against the Texas Tech Red Raiders. They don't play any defense. So I don't even really Leonard Fournette had a career day in 2015 in a bowl game against them. This guy had a career day against them. The next guy that I'm going to talk about had a career. If you play against Texas Tech, you too can have a career day. So I don't like mentioning Texas Tech as a reference. Like, don't put them on your resume. That's one of those situations. Just leave that off the resume. You're not going to get any points for that. As a matter of fact, I may dock you a few. But I've always been in the mindset of, look, if they put you in front of inferior competition, destroy that competition. And that's what he went out and did. And his physicality was on full display along with all of the rest of his assets and traits in that game versus Texas Tech. And so his physicality is alarming. There were several plays in that Texas Tech game. One where he reverses field. He stiff arms a guy and reverses field and picks up 30 yards on a play where he should have been tackled for a 5 or 6 yard loss. There's a play where he gets the football in the backfield and they've got him dead to rights. There's about 4 Texas Tech defenders out there, and somehow he ducks and he breaks 2 tackles and he's off to the races. And if not for a holding penalty by one of his teammates, it's another touchdown on a day where he scored 5 or 6 touchdowns in the game, 3 receiving, another 2 rushing. So, this guy was phenomenal against Texas Tech, and the physicality was on display in that game as well in others. Patience is the next pro. Very patient, and you'll see him around the line. And matter of fact, I want to talk about this next pro as well. I want to lump these two together because I think they go hand in hand. Line of scrimmage elusiveness is the next pro. So patience and line of scrimmage elusiveness to me go together because this is a guy that his patience around the line of scrimmage is sometimes disheartening because he's a little too patient, but there are times where his patience is a virtue around the line of scrimmage where he will pick and prod. And it isn't a jump cut necessarily. It's more of like a hop step that he has where he kind of hops and he kind of sets up blocks. And it's such a patient and very elegant and graceful hop step. And he sets up his blockers and all of a sudden a huge hole opens up and then he takes off. And his elusiveness, I talked about the Texas Tech game and how he was able to break tackles at the line of scrimmage, even behind it. You see this guy find a way when there's nothing there to come out the other side, and it's remarkable. And I think it's because he's got a little bit of elusiveness. Sometimes your blockers aren't going to win, okay? And you're going to have to make something out of nothing, all right? And as a back, if you're an elite back, you're going to be asked to do that several times throughout the course of the game where, look, your guard just got beat right off the snap. Guy's going to be in the backfield immediately. Can you make that guy miss? I don't care how you do it. Stiff arm, spin move, jump cut, hop step. Don't really care. You just got to find a way to dodge that defender and get something on the play and turn a play that should be a 2 or 3 yard loss into a 2 or 3 yard gain. He can do that. His line of scrimmage elusiveness, along with his patience, are off the charts for me. And I think that's another one of his attributes that are going to serve him well at the next level. Contact balance. This is a guy that just, again, I hate referencing anyone in the Big 12 because the Big 12 is a joke defensively. You know this, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But his contact balance is outstanding. You turn on the Baylor game, you turn on any tape you like, and just watch this guy work. It's a thing of beauty, bouncing off of people, finding a way to put his hand down and keep his balance, stumbling into the end zone, diving like he did against Auburn in the bowl game where he's getting hit, he's stumbling, but finds a way to keep his balance, dive across the pylon, get the football over the end zone. Initially ruled out of bounds, he kept his balance inside after being contacted multiple times, and stretch the football over the goal line. These are the types of plays that this kid can make. So contact balance, also something that Joe Mixon has in his repertoire. Multiple speed runner, and I thought that he wasn't as fast, and I'm guilty as charged. I thought he wasn't as fast. I said he's in the Big 12. There are not a ton of athletes that wow you coming from that conference in terms of on the defensive side of football. So he's probably going to look a little bit faster than what he really is. I thought he was one of those guys that, because I've always had this thing, other than Adrian Peterson, Oklahoma running backs just don't do it for me. So I just felt like he's another one of these Oklahoma backs like DeMarco Murray. He's not really that fast. He's okay, but he's not really that fast. And I watched him against Baylor, and again, it's Baylor. It's the Big 12. I hate to keep beating that horse, but it's legit. That conference defensively is a joke. It's a farce. So, but you still see him run away from guys, and that's impressive at 6'1", 228. So this guy's got multiple speeds. I talked about the patience. He's also got the ability to turn the corner if need be, turn the speed up. He's also got the ability to downshift. He's got it all in terms of being a multiple speed runner. The patience I talked about earlier, the ability to hit the hole and have that burst when it's there. There's a play against Texas Tech where he's early in the ball game, one-on-one with the linebacker. The linebacker's flat-footed. Why? I don't know. But Mixon runs right by him. And Baker Mayfield lays it out there. He catches it, runs into the end zone for his first of 5 touchdowns on the day. And he's got that kind of that burst, that speed that you're looking for, and a guy that can change the game for you. So multiple speed runner is definitely Joe Mixon. Yaxter, I talked about this guy having contact balance. He can power through contact. He gets yards after contact. I talked about him diving into the end zone versus Auburn. He's a guy that gets yards after contact. Talked about the Texas Tech play where he's in a pile, looks like he's going to lose about 4 yards, somehow comes out on the other side and scores a touchdown. It's called back due to a holding penalty on D.D. Westbrook. But nonetheless, it's a guy that just gets yards after contact. Big guy, uses his physicality to get yards after contact. Receiving threat. I think looking at him as a receiving threat, I feel pretty confident saying that my pecking order of receivers in this draft catching the football is as follows. You have Christian McCaffrey as number 1. Number 2 for me is now Joe Mixon. He leapfrogs that of Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara for me. He's that talented as a pass catcher and receiving threat out of the backfield. You can split him out wide. He wins there. You can go ahead and have him come out of the backfield. He wins there. I already referenced him running past a guy in the Texas Tech game for a touchdown. He's a threat to hurt you from anywhere on the field, catching the football. I think his hands are outstanding. There's a big catch late in the TCU ball game when they're trying to blow that lead, and another one of these wild and wacky affairs in the Big 12 where defense is optional. He comes up with a huge catch. It's an underthrown football by Baker Mayfield. He adjusts to it late in the game, catches it, picks up a critical first down. He can catch the football, folks. He's a big-time threat to catch it, and so I love that about him. He's a big-time receiving threat. 3-down back. I was impressed with him in pass pro. I just told you he's a phenomenal receiver out of the backfield, and he can run the football. So what more do I need to say? What more can I say? I don't need to say anything else. He's a 3-down back candidate in my book. Low mileage and tread off the tires. This is a guy that split carries at Oklahoma his entire career. He split time with Samaje Perine. He never in his career at Oklahoma had more touches or carries, I should say, than Samaje Perine. So this is a guy that was never asked to be the guy necessarily, the lead back, even though you could argue that he was the lead back, especially in 2016. But nonetheless, he split time. He doesn't have a lot of tread off the tires, no low mileage, not a lot of dents and dinks on the Carfax report. So there's a lot to like there when talking about Joe Mixon as well. Durability, speaking of which, he only missed one game due to injury in his collegiate career. Now, we all know about the 2014 situation, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit later on. But as far as on the field is concerned, only missed one game in 2 seasons due to injury. So this is a guy that is very, very durable. And finally, he offers you a little bit of special teams value as well. Here's a guy that in the big showdown with Ohio State early in the season ran a kickoff back for a touchdown. So I don't think necessarily you want him back on punts. I don't think he's great at that per se, but he can offer you that. He did do that at Oklahoma, but I don't think that's one of his natural strong suits there. But on kickoffs, if you want to stick him back there, he's more than capable of busting off one and making something happen there. So he does offer you that if you're looking for that in the package that is known as Joe Mixon. So we go from all of those pros to, of course, some of his cons, and there's one big one there that we'll discuss right up next. So we're gonna save the big elephant in the room for last. Let's get to some of the on the field things that kind of trouble me a little bit. He didn't play in the pro style offense at Oklahoma, even though his offensive coordinator was very creative and they did some really cute things in the backfield. Bottom line is he was never more than 2 yards beyond the quarterback. So he's not used to a 5-yard or a 7-yard set. They were always in the pistol or the shotgun, a lot of spread at Oklahoma. I don't know if Baker Mayfield was ever under the center. So you're talking about a pure spread offense. And so he's not comfortable in a pro style offense quite yet. But like I said, with running backs, it's not as big a transition as it is for the quarterbacks who don't play in a pro style offense. But that being said, it's still a bit of a transition moving on to the next level. And oh, by the way, he played in the Big 12. That's also a demerit that I give. If you play in the Big 12, there's no defense there, folks. I'm sorry. I know I've said it at least 5 or 6 times in this video, but I need to reinforce that the numbers are inflated in that conference. It's a joke. So just take it with a grain of salt. He can be overly patient at the line of scrimmage. Sometimes, especially when you're down by the goal line, I want you to just put your head down and get in the end zone. Just go. And he can sit down and sit there and kind of jump around and do that hop step and then try to get to the outside. There's an example, I want to say against Texas Tech maybe, where I thought there was an opportunity for him to just put his head down and get into the end zone. It might have been Baylor. It might have been a different game I was watching, but there was an opportunity for him to just put his head down, probably would have scored. Instead, he does that a little hop step and finds his way to the outside where he's met by 3 Texas Tech defenders and pushed backwards. Doesn't score a touchdown. Now, ultimately, they get in the end zone, maybe the next play or the play after that. But bottom line is, sometimes you can't pussyfoot and tiptoe and dance at the line of scrimmage. You just need to go much faster than slow. And sometimes he can be overly patient at the line of scrimmage, and it can cost him. And sometimes he's one of these guys that he wants to make a big play on every play, so he'll go backwards or he'll try to reverse field. And he got away with it because he played in the Big 12. But what happens when you're at the next level and guys are just as athletic as you and you're not going to be able to get away? So we'll see what happens. But sometimes he can be overly patient at the line of scrimmage. Never been a lead back. This one isn't as big a con for me as the other 2 that I've mentioned. Really, in this league now, you rarely see one guy doing the heavy lifting. It's usually running back by committee with most teams. And I think he'll fit into a system where you've already got one back that you like, but you don't love him. You bring in Mixon, you love him, you like the other guy, you use them together. Voila, you got a nice 1-2 punch. So this isn't a really big one, but he was never the actual guy at Oklahoma. And then finally, let's attack this elephant in the room, because this is why the guy wasn't invited to the combine. This is why teams like the Patriots and the Dolphins have already taken him off their board. This is why he's not going to be selected in the first round, in my estimation. Off the field issues, and really you can take the S off of that and just say off the field issue, one singular event in his life that has changed the whole outlook of his draft status and really his life in general. And that was the assault of a young woman on the OU campus at a restaurant where he got into an altercation and just cold-cocked the lady, knocked her unconscious temporarily. She sustained a concussion, among other injuries, and it was vicious. If you haven't seen it, it is a vicious blow that he delivered to that young woman, and it was caught on tape, and that's what was so damning for him. He spent the entire 2014 season suspended because of that. Went through counseling, has done a number of different things to try to rectify the situation. There's no going back. There's no changing what he has done. What's done is done. It's in the past. You hope that he's reformed himself. It was a very heinous act, and you don't want to see that. I was always taught to never put your hands on a woman. So, of course, me having two sisters, me having a daughter, me having a mom, a grandma, all of those things, I was horrified when I saw it. But bottom line is, people make mistakes. They happen. And so you can't crucify this guy for the remainder of his life. He's a young man. He made a mistake as a young man. And I was also taught that frontal cortex, that lobe in your brain, doesn't fully develop until you turn the age of like 22, 23 years old. So you make some irrational decisions. Could he have walked away? Should he have walked away? Probably so. Was he provoked? Maybe, but there's still no excuse for what he did. But like I said, let's not persecute this man and condemn him to being this just this monster for the rest of his life. He made a mistake. He's owned up to his mistake. And now you just want to see this guy be able to move on with his life. And we'll see what happens, where he goes in the draft. But there are some teams that, the NFL right now is on their whole domestic violence kick. So, they're hypocrites. Like I said, I've said my piece on that. I'm not going to sit here and give you this long soliloquy about the NFL and how I feel about their whole policy and the way they're doing things. But bottom line is, he's not going in the first round because of this one thing. Okay, I can assure you that there are teams that want to pull. They're desperate. They would love to pull the trigger on Joe Mixon in the first round. But the PR hit and all of the explaining and the backlash that would come with making this guy a first round pick, it's just too much to bear for these NFL teams. I think they would much rather take the scrutiny in the second or the third round, but not the first round. It's too important of a round. It's too big of a decision to make. I think teams, all 32 of them, will allow him to pass without him hearing his name in day one of the draft. But I would not be shocked if he hears his name in day two in the draft. And I think a team like the Detroit Lions would be a great landing spot for a guy like Joe Mixon. So that's his draft prospects 101 breakdown. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we covered all here on the Louie Tee Network. Make sure you watch all of my videos in this series. If you haven't done so, go through the entire catalog, Louie Tee Network. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel. You guys, if you want to see me break down Joe Mixon or any other player that we've done in this series, simply just need to have 1,000 views in conjunction with 100 likes. You make that happen, and I will make that happen. You guys, have a good one. I'll see you next time. Take care. Whether you're looking for more great content or more of me, your man, Louie Tee, follow, like, and subscribe to the following social media platforms of mine.